So in this video, I'm going to present to you a number of astonishing archaeological discoveries made over the last century pertaining to the very mysterious origins of Mesoamerican history, of which the vast majority of Mesoamerican history was destroyed or burned at the hands of Diego de Landa in the mid-1500s in the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, I'm going to make a plethora of videos covering the lost history and lost knowledge of many different cultures in the ancient Americas, but today we're going to be focusing on the Olmecs, who are largely presented as being the mother culture of Mesoamerica. They existed between 1600 and 300 BC and largely set the stage for Mesoamerica as a whole. And I also want to state that while I do believe that the ancient monumental feats of ancient cultures may have been completed in a way differing from what we're told by academia, I do believe that all of these ancient megalithic sites around the world were in fact built by the ancient people who lived there. So most commonly, the Olmecs are known for their giant megalithic stone heads, the Olmec heads. These are a collection of 17 solid basalt blocks found in the ancient swamps of central Mexico, which would be modern-day Veracruz, Tabasco, and Puebla, Mexico. These heads weigh anywhere from 6 to 40 tons, and they're carved into portraits of the ancient Olmec kings they depict. Unfortunately though, these Olmec heads tell us as little as they do a lot about the Olmecs, meaning that they bring up as many or way more questions than they do answers. What we do know is that these Olmec heads were quarried more than 50 miles from the sites they were discovered, down rushing rivers and through swampy mountainous terrain. So let's start with a brief overview of who the Olmecs were and put them in their time and place. The Olmecs name is derivative of the Nahuatl language used by the Aztecs for describing a land and people further to the east of Tenochtitlan, people of the rubber country, as ancient rubber is found in that area. Mesoamerican rubber trees, known as the Castilla elastica, were harvested by nearly all high cultures of Mesoamerica. Surprisingly, even with modern archaeological discoveries, we still don't know the actual true name of the Olmecs or what they called themselves, so we have to be contented for now with the designation that the Aztecs gave to that area. But that was in the 14 to 1500s. More than 300 years would go by before anyone in the modern era would discover the remnants of these Olmec people. The Aztecs themselves may not even have had knowledge of the Olmecs beyond various jade artifacts in the Aztec possession that they had found, or perhaps had been passed down through various cultures, since the time of the Olmecs was more than 2,000 years before the Aztecs. Unfortunately, we will likely never know for certain if the Aztecs may have had a direct knowledge of the Olmecs due to the fact that more than 99% of all written Mesoamerican history was burned in pyres, which means small mounds or heaps of stacked Aztec and Maya books. This was done as a result of the Spanish attempts to convert the native people to Christianity by burning their written history, tearing down their monuments, and extinguishing their religion and culture. This leaves us in a place where we have to use the little remaining evidence and a whole lot of detective work to piece back ancient Mesoamerica's history. But unfortunately, due to the widespread book burning from the Maya heartland to the Aztec heartland, we will likely never know the full history in its entirety. But according to the archaeological evidence, what do we know of the ancient Olmecs' knowledge of astronomy, architecture, transportation, religion, and ancient technology? So in 1925, the Olmec capital of La Venta was officially discovered in the Mexican state of Tabasco. One of the most peculiar archaeological finds of this site are the megalithic stone columns found beneath the plazas at La Venta. These are hardly known about outside of the academic world. Ancient history enthusiasts rarely know of these megalithic burials. Beneath La Venta's Complex A, Burial Tomb A, Monument 7, is believed to have been constructed sometime between 700 and 400 BC and is made out of extremely large basalt columns assembled into a caged chamber tomb of sorts with a solid limestone floor. When I first saw this tomb in person, I'd never seen or heard of it before or really seen anything like it, and I was actually shocked at its scale. The ceiling columns were well over my head, and the size of the columns was as shocking as the size of the Olmec heads and altars I had seen as well. The royal figure buried within this tomb was nowhere to be found when the tomb was discovered, as the acidic soil had completely dissolved the organic material. But what was found were jade ceremonial and funerary objects that were completely covered in cinnabar. Now, Cinnabar and Jade are not natural to the Olmec heartland. This indicates the immense power, connections, and wealth that the Olmecs must have had to commission not only the construction of a monument like this, but to have access to riches such as fine jade that could only be found in the Maya regions of Guatemala or Belize at that time. Also found in this tomb was a mysterious magnetite mirror. These Olmec mirrors and jade objects that they produced were of a quality of polish far exceeding anything that any other culture or civilization had achieved at that time. Furthermore, these basalt columns were not quarried nearby the city of Levinta. They had to have come from more than 50 miles away, where the nearest volcanic deposits were found in the Sierra de la Tuxtla volcanic belt of modern-day Veracruz. And yet again, this alludes to the immense power and wealth of Olmec rulers to commission and successfully complete such backbreaking work over the course of hundreds or maybe thousands of years. Furthermore, you have to consider what were the technological means and ingenious methods that were used to transport these stone columns from the basalt quarries to Levinta. This is something that we'll touch on throughout this video. And apart from the stone column tombs, monuments, and Olmec heads, there is another form of megalithic art and architecture taken on by the Olmecs, and that is the altars. Or at least that is what Matthew Sterling, an early and influential archaeologist in the Olmec world, proposed them to be. These are enormous rectangular basalt monuments decorated with glyphs and depictions of Olmec people or potentially rulers. In the case of the large scene at Altar 4 in Levinta, it appears to depict a man emerging from a cave or even a portal of some sort. This may be a reference to early Olmec civilization emerging from caves in southern Mexico, as archaeological findings are increasingly pointing to Mesoamerican civilization having its roots in the emergence from caves. Or it may be representing a man emerging from a psychedelic, shamanic state. The Olmecs were very likely using hallucinogenic psychedelics for religious rituals, in which they would seemingly become something like a were-jaguar figure, half man, half jaguar, similar to what we understand as the concept of a werewolf. These half-breed humans are seen all throughout Olmec art and architecture. This particular altar weighs at least 33 tons and was likely hauled to the site before being carved, meaning that the original stone weighed significantly more, likely north of 40 tons. Again, the means by which this altar and the other 13 discovered altars were transported is not known, and how the Olmecs transported the stones used to carve these monuments across rivers, swamps, and mountain ranges is not known either. Furthermore, these altars may have also acted as thrones in which Olmec rulers sat upon. This idea comes from a fragmented monument found at San Lorenzo that depicts the lower half of what is likely a ruler seated upon a rectangular throne. Archaeologists theorize that the carved ropes are depicting a seated ruler sitting upon a stone altar or throne being pulled by his subjects. So, not entirely unlike the ancient Roman or Greek mosaics found in the Old World, thousands of tons of ancient Olmec greenstone was found buried meters deep beneath the plazas at Levinta. These green stones, shaped like ancient Mesoamerican axe heads, were arranged in mosaic patterns depicting Olmec gods or the face of the Olmec dragon depicted on Monument 19 in the same city. This is also seen as the earliest depiction of the feathered serpent of Mesoamerica, also known as Kukulkan to the Maya and Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs. And with the depiction of the feathered serpent being so intricate among the Olmecs, who already predate the classic Maya by nearly 2,000 years, it is very likely that the worship of the feathered or plumed serpent goes back even further than the classic Olmec era. Thus far, there have been 5 Olmec mosaic floors found, and the largest of them was found comprised of 28 layers of mosaic floors, weighing in at least several thousand tons. To give you an idea of that weight, the stone of the pregnant woman at Baalbek is over 1,200 tons. It's thought that these mosaics are potentially meant to be offerings to the Olmec gods, and stacked together, these mosaics are enormous works of art, which are inexplicably buried by the Olmecs themselves. Another mysterious buried offering cache is known formally as Offering 4. Which depicts a scene of 16 human figures with seemingly elongated skulls standing around a miniature stela. 15 of the 16 figures were carved in jade, while the central figure himself was carved from sandstone. This may be a depiction of an ancient ritual taking place, or perhaps a king standing in front of his stela addressing the public or his subjects. It is a symbolic peek of some kind into the Olmec world and Olmec way of life, but we just don't have the written context to fully understand what may have been taking place here. As for why the Olmecs may have buried their own monuments, mosaics, and burial caches, this may have been a selfless symbolic act of giving up their most valuable items or constructing something that takes a significant amount of time and then burying it as a sacrifice to their gods. Or maybe it was an act of burying their past to symbolically move forward. I'm reminded a bit of the speculations as to whether or not Göbekli Tepe in ancient Turkey was intentionally buried, and if so, what is that purpose? The Olmecs and the inhabitants of Göbekli Tepe were both, in a way, the progenitors of civilization within their respective areas, and they both may have intentionally buried their monuments either as a large sacrifice to their gods, or perhaps as a symbolic burying of their past as they move forward. This is actually well observed in the Maya world, where the Maya people will remove the statued head of past rulers as a ritualistic and symbolic goodbye to their past. It may have also been that ancient Mesoamericans such as the Maya or the Olmecs felt that the spiritual essence of rulers continued to live beyond their death within their own monuments. Perhaps defacing, burying, or beheading their monuments was a way of capturing, releasing, or even harnessing that spirit. These are things that we just really don't quite know yet. And these are things that may never be fully understood. And if you're starting to see a trend here in Mesoamerica, it's that we only know a very limited amount about these ancient people. Finally, that brings us to the Olmec pyramids, which not many people even know that the Olmec built pyramids. With the presence of colossal basalt heads, altars, giant monuments, and stela, not many people realize that the Olmecs actually built pyramids. The problem here is that all of the officially recognized Olmec pyramids are actually earthen structures similar to mounds. These pyramids have been grown over and their original features are just lost to time, which prevents archaeologists from being able to faithfully reconstruct the site, and it also prevents archaeologists from being able to identify potential cosmological alignments that the Olmecs may have recognized and aligned their structures to. However, a recent discovery made in Puebla, Mexico has revealed several ancient Mesoamerican ball courts, ceremonial centers, and even the potential base of a stone pyramid believed to have been built by the Olmecs. If this is proven true, it would be the first stone Olmec pyramid ever discovered and likely the oldest stone pyramid from Mesoamerica thus far. Furthermore, with the stone angles preserved, we may also be able to determine the pyramid's celestial alignments, if there are any, to see if the Olmecs revered some of the same astronomical bodies as the later Maya and other cultures would. This could play quite a large part in how we understand the extent of astronomical knowledge in Mesoamerica, as well as highlighting just how far back this knowledge goes. Likely, if the Olmecs were constructing stone pyramids aligned to bodies in the night sky, this extensive knowledge of astronomy would go back even further than the Olmecs. Now, this is just a side note, but I also want to add that among all of the Mesoamerican innovations that are attributed to the Olmecs, the Mesoamerican ball game also likely finds its origins in Olmec society. And the only eyewitness accounts that we have of the Mesoamerican ball game come from early Spanish chroniclers who visited the Aztecs in the mid-1500s. They chronicled the immense skill, danger, and deep cultural ties and traditions around the Mesoamerican ball game. Using only their rear and knees, Aztec ball players could bounce a solid, very heavy rubber ball back and forth for over an hour without missing a beat, while being in imminent danger of being hit in the wrong way by the rubber ball. One account details a ball player taking a noticeably hard hit to the stomach, going to sit down, and then dying just an hour later, likely due to internal organ eruption. The Mesoamerican ball was roughly the size of a modern-day volleyball, but it weighed anywhere from 6 to at least 10 pounds. So getting hit to the head or stomach could have and often did result in death for some players. Interestingly though, the rubber that the Aztecs used for these balls came from the Olmec heartland, hence why the Aztecs called the people from that area rubber people, or people from the land of rubber. In 1862, a farmer by the name of Jose Maria Melgar y Serrano made the very first discovery of a colossal Olmec head. It was not widely publicized or reported on outside of Mexico, and it would unfortunately not be until 1938 when Matthew Stirling would come to perform a proper excavation of the stone head. And this incredible discovery and excavation would spark a rush of investigations, excavations, and research into the Olmec world. But initially, researchers had no idea that these monuments were the work of an entirely different civilization from the Maya or other recognized Mesoamerican cultures, let alone that these discoveries were considerably more ancient than any of the others. But as excavation and research continued throughout the 20th century, it became overwhelmingly apparent that these megalithic monuments were the work of a high culture that predated any other known established ancient civilization in Mesoamerica. And they were given the designation Olmec as a result of the name that the Aztecs had given to the area in which the heads were later found. But what makes the ancient Olmec civilization so enigmatic, and how does it capture the imagination and curiosity of archaeologists, independent researchers, and enthusiasts all over the world? Well, the Olmec are thus far the first accepted example of ancient megalithic architecture in all of the ancient Americas. Yes, there are ancient Andean sites in South America like Tiwanaku, Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, and Cusco, whose megalithic architecture rivals or dwarfs some of these Olmec monuments, but the many theories of their great antiquity dating back over 10 to 15,000 years has not yet been proven, and they are still believed by archaeologists and academics alike to be considerably younger than these Olmec sites. So the Olmec heads are carved from a volcanic rock called basalt. Currently, there are 17 Olmec heads known to exist, with many more likely buried beneath ancient south-central Mexico. The smallest head, Monument 4 at San Lorenzo, weighs at least 6 tons, with the largest head, the La Cobada head, weighing in at over 40 tons. These stone heads are believed to be portraits of the kings or rulers who commissioned them, and the size may be indicative of each king's immense power. Furthermore, as stated earlier, the ability to quarry the stones for these monuments from over 50 miles away through mountainous terrain, swamps, and rushing rivers necessitates the need for an immense amount of power to commission the workforce, as well as a tremendous amount of knowledge in regards to transporting massive stone boulders through the diverse terrain. Perhaps most considerably, they needed the knowledge and ability to build rafts or boats equipped enough to carry this tremendous amount of weight. And oddly, in a very similar manner to the explanation given as to how the ancient Egyptians moved the rose granite blocks from the Aswan Quarry to the Giza Plateau by riverboat, the same half-baked explanation is given here. Now, I should clarify that I don't think there's some grand ancient lost technology conspiracy that's being hidden from us by Mexican archaeologists. I just think that they legitimately do not have a way to explain this. We assume that it's very likely that they did in fact move these Olmec heads up and down the central South Mexican rivers using some kind of riverboat, but we just don't have any surviving examples of what these boats looked like or how they were constructed. I should also add that all of these monuments were very likely carved on the sites that they were discovered at, meaning that they hadn't been carved before they were transported, so they weighed significantly more while they were being transported than they do today. In a very interesting episode of Dr. Ed Barnhart's podcast ArchaeoEd titled The Olmecs, he gives a story of his Olmec Heartland travels with a nautical engineer who developed a software that would allow you to plug in the size of your theoretical Olmec head as well as the size of the balsa river raft said to have been used by the Olmecs to transport their monuments. And what they found was that even if you made a wooden raft 50 feet wide, an Olmec head over 5 tons would sink the raft. And again, the smallest head is just 6 tons, with the largest head being over 40 tons. There are alternative theories as to how Olmec rafts may have been constructed, but theory will only take us so far. None of the theories being provided by academics or independent researchers alike have ever been attempted to be proven right or wrong. And as an interesting side note, I've never seen anyone else theorize this, but I do believe that other Mesoamerican cultures were at least somewhat aware of their Olmec ancestors. On the southern coast of Guatemala, more than 300 miles as the crow flies from the Olmec heartland of Veracruz, another colossal stone head can be found, built by an entirely separate culture, the Pipil Maya peoples. It's my theory that these people were likely somehow aware of the giant Olmec heads, perhaps by way of travel or stories that they had heard from travelers coming through the Central American area, and wanted to build their own similar monuments. Now, this example is just one of several other colossal post-Olmec stone heads found throughout Central America, of which I believe are very likely inspired directly by the Olmecs. I don't know if that's a popular theory among academics, but I personally think it's likely. The Olmecs had an immense impact on the way of life in Mesoamerica, and the mysteries of their methods of quarrying, transporting, and carving these massive basalt monuments still baffles researchers and academics today. Finally, there is great speculation among the archaeological community that not only was the idea of divine kingship spread from the Olmec heartland throughout Mesoamerica, but that the Mesoamerican or Maya calendar may also have its origins in Olmec knowledge and tradition. Now, concrete evidence for this claim has not been substantiated by considerable evidence thus far, but the use of a proto-bar and dot writing system, which was prevalently used by the Maya to record dates and events, may have been found at an archaeological site in Tabasco, Mexico, the San Andres glyphs, carbon dated to about 650 BC. These seem to depict a bird speaking. The speech glyphs are logograms that have been seen in other areas of later Mesoamerican sites. Recognized is the logogram for king and the number 3, and the commonly seen designation ahau, meaning ruler. Likely these glyphs are an example of a very early writing of an Olmec king's name using a number system very similar to the same number system seen widely used among the Maya around 700 to 1000 years later. As research continues, more evidence may in fact prove the origins of the Maya calendar and Mesoamerican calendar and numerology system lie deep within the remote history of Olmec civilization. So, although it seems like many of the Olmec monuments, colossal heads, and lost cities have already been discovered, there is still so much left to uncover about one of Mesoamerica's progenitor civilizations. We still do not know where exactly the Olmecs came from, if they were indigenous to that area or if they migrated from elsewhere in Mesoamerica. We also don't have an exact picture or understanding of their writing and numerology systems, as stated before. Some archaeological finds have given us a glimpse into the fact that they certainly understood an early form of writing and numerology, but the quote-unquote Rosetta Stone of Olmec civilization is still yet to be found. We also do not fully understand the religion, the concept of a were-jaguar, their use of psychedelics, or the origin of Mesoamerica's fabled plumed or feathered serpent, also known as Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl. Similar to the Maya, we don't exactly know why their civilization ended or why they may have defaced and buried their own monuments. We also don't have a clear understanding of their astrology. However, perhaps this new, potentially Olmec stone pyramid will shed some light and show us if the Olmecs constructed their buildings to align with solar cycles. And finally, in 2020, it was reported that archaeological teams in Tabasco, Mexico had uncovered an ancient 1-mile-long structure at the archaeological site of Aguada Phoenix near the Guatemalan border. It is the oldest monumental construction ever found in the Maya region, believed to date back to at least 1000 BC, which is over 1,500 years before the height of the Maya Classic period. This may actually turn out to be another capital of the Olmec world, even further east than archaeologists had ever imagined that the Olmecs had gone. And as excavations continue, we may find ourselves living through the discovery of more Olmec heads, altars, monuments, column tombs, and Olmec treasures. Okay, so I should probably address the polarizing elephant in the room surrounding fringe theories of Olmec origins, namely the idea that the Olmecs actually descended from ancient African seafarers that settled in the Veracruz area and taught the Mesoamerican people how to farm, build, architecture, and write. This theory is almost entirely based on the observation that Olmec heads have big round faces, broad noses, and broad lips. Plus, some theorists try to say that Mesoamerican crops like maize appear in Africa prior to Columbian contact. But that is just not true. The truth is, the Olmec heads look exactly like the descendants of the Olmec people who still live in Olmec heartland today. They too have big round faces, broad noses, and big lips. And absolutely zero detection of African DNA has been found in any forensic archaeological research done in respect to the Olmecs. However, not all fringe theories can be so easily dismissed. As depicted on Monument 13 from Levinta, we see what appears to be a bearded man walking or wearing a turban and carrying a flag. The interesting thing to note here is that the Olmecs and other Native Americans in general were notorious for being completely unable to grow facial hair. They also did not wear turbans. Looking at the foot glyph carved next to him, this has been interpreted as meaning the traveler. This same man may also be seen on other monuments around Levinta as well, such as Monument 63, depicting perhaps the same man beneath what seems to be a shark. And despite the Olmecs' close proximity to the coastline, there isn't any evidence at all that points towards the Olmec being a seafaring civilization going out further into the Gulf Coast. Furthermore, a clay rendering at the Olmec side of Tres Zapotes depicts a bearded man with a pointy goatee-style beard wearing what is very likely yet another turban that is not interpreted as being his hair. These enigmas cause even the most conservative archaeologists to scratch their beards and wonder what these monuments could be trying to tell us. And even more adventurous researchers entertain the idea of Mediterranean influences arriving on the Gulf coast of Mexico, the Phoenicians. During the height of the Phoenician seafaring days, they were sailing all the way around the coast of Africa and back, and this time period lasted between 1500 and 300 BC, exactly the same time as Olmec reign in Mesoamerica. Some research has even proven that if an ancient boat traveled too far west of the Strait of Gibraltar out of the Mediterranean Sea without turning south towards the African coastline, they could be pulled by deep ocean currents into the Atlantic Ocean and down into the Caribbean into the Gulf Coast. Now, we don't have any evidence for Phoenician visitors in the ancient Caribbean or Maya territories of the Yucatan Peninsula, but the civilizations living in these areas also hadn't yet developed writing systems. Perhaps someday more archaeological excavations will either prove or disprove this theory. So I hope that I was able to shed some kind of light on just how little we know about this very mysterious Mesoamerican culture and the origins of Mesoamerican culture in general, and also show you how with every discovery that we make, it actually leaves us with more questions than answers. The ancient Americas, in my opinion, and the reason I've become so fascinated with Central and South America is because it is so much harder to digest than Old World archaeology. In the Old World, you have a fairly linear chronology, beginning in ancient Egypt around 4000 BC with the Naqada culture, and it's one continuous straight line of different lineages of rulers, all the way from let's say Narmer in 3100 BC in ancient Egypt, all the way until Cleopatra, the end of ancient Egypt, and you can go even further to the fall of Rome. For the most part, it's one linear straight line. But in Mesoamerica, we just haven't put these pieces together, and it's anything but a straight line. Each individual city in some ways acted as a city-state and had its own leaders and its own rulers. It's extremely complicated, and one archaeologist could spend their entire career studying one site and never learn everything about it. So if you guys like these longer form videos, please do me a favor and like, share, and subscribe. These videos do take a tremendous amount of time to research, write, film, and edit. And I do all of it myself, and this is something that I want to do full time someday, but I can only do that if you guys help me out by, again, liking, sharing the video with other people who might be interested, and subscribing to my YouTube channel, and maybe turning on the notifications so you can see when I post. I would also love to be able to use this channel as a vehicle to travel to archaeological sites all over Central and South America, maybe even over to Egypt one day when I can afford to, and document my journeys and make videos like this with actual footage from these sites that you're not going to see anywhere else. Also, as a side note, I am leading my very first excursion into the Yucatan with my good friend Anyextee through his company Adept Expeditions. This expedition is going to be from March 17th through March 23rd of 2024. We're going to be visiting the ancient Maya sites of Uxmal, Chichen Itza, Ekbalam, Labnash, Skitchmook, and even a set of uncharted ruins in the middle of the Yucatan jungle. I'll have a link in the description below, and I would love to see you guys there. And those of you who have already signed up, I cannot wait to meet you guys, dine and travel and explore the jungles of the Yucatan together. It's going to be an expedition that you're not going to want to miss. Anyways, I'm Luke Caverns. If you guys would like to learn more about ancient lost civilizations, ancient lost technology, ancient mysteries, and discoveries that are currently happening in the world of ancient Central and South America and even Egypt and some Mediterranean civilizations, well, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Thank you guys so much. If you're here still watching at the end, I'm Luke Caverns, and I'll see you next time.